At the end of a grade, we, and this is a surprise to no one, have to export our product from Resolve and deliver the graded media back to our client. We do this in the delivery panel, which is accessed by clicking the little rocket ship icon down here, right in the bottom of the screen and on the right-hand side. Now, we have a few important things in front of us, and we're going to go through each of them. First, we have another viewer, obviously, but this lets us see the final graded timeline that we've produced. This will show us any and all active nodes on the frame under the playhead. It is important to note that if we render our projects out with inactive nodes, then they will not be rendered into the final export. We only get color adjustments from the active nodes. Before we move on to the delivery panel at the end of the grade, we always watch our project through twice, just like delivering an offline edit. I used to really rush this when I was starting out, and one time I really embarrassed myself in front of a feature film client, and I don't make that mistake anymore. Next, and to the left, we have all of our delivery settings. This is where we decide the containers, codecs, and naming conventions to be used. Up at the top, we have a list of presets, and we can take a look at those in a later lecture. And at the bottom, on the right-hand side down here, we have our timeline. We can view things in here, but we must return to the edit panel if we want to make any changes. Now, in the top right over here, where it currently says no jobs in queue, we have our render queue. And this shows us the jobs we have queued up and the jobs we have already rendered. Now, this is a very basic overview of the delivery panel, and we're going to move right on to delivering an actual project. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay, so now, for argument's sake, let's say that I have a completed grade on my short sequence up here, and by now you should have on yours for real. The next step is to render this out so it can be delivered to our clients. There are two main ways of doing this. We can render it out as a single clip and a single file, just like the baked master that we brought into Resolve, or we can export every single edit as an individual file and then deliver an XML, EDL, or AAF document alongside those to allow our client to reconform the project in their choice of editing software. We're only going to cover the first and most basic version of this in this lecture because we're mainly just looking at the interface and the various settings that we have to work with. So, the first thing we want to do is here in the upper left, go to video, and make sure export video is checked because we can, if we want to, remove the video and just export the audio. And then we have various drop-down menus down here. It will default to some version of H.264. Now, I'm making what I would call an intermediary delivery back to my client. I want it to be a high-quality file that can be rendered out again without losing too much quality. What I don't want to do is deliver H.264 at this point because my client will add credits, they will add the final sound mix, they will add a number of elements to this before they perform the final export on their end. So I'm actually going to deliver a big file that will allow them to do that. So on Format, I'm going to click and I'm going to choose QuickTime. Now, I'm a Windows user, so I don't get ProRes in DaVinci Resolve, only in the Adobe suite. So I don't use the ProRes codec for delivery here. Under Codec, I'm going to click and choose DNX-HR. Now, DNX-HR is the Avid codec, but made for higher than 1080 resolutions, and it's the standard intermediary codec for the Avid workflow now. And if you're in Windows, it's what you'll be using instead of ProRes most of the time. Underneath Type, I'm going to choose DNX-HR 444 10-bit. This, to me, strikes the ideal balance between file size and quality, and I make that sound like a compromise, but it's actually very, very good indeed. There are other options. There's a 12-bit option. Unless you're delivering something very, very high-end, you're not going to need that. I don't know for certain, but I would guess certain VFX workflows maybe. The absolute majority of the time 10-bit will be fine. If you are using a Mac, then you want to render out ProRes 422HQ unless somebody tells you to do otherwise. Underneath that, we can choose our resolution, match it to the project, 1080 in this case, then we have frame rate. The other checkboxes we will ignore for now. They're not relevant to us, and they're usually not relevant in the grade. These are more either VFX workflow things for alpha or for final mastering for the chapters from markers. Use constant bitrate is checked. We're just going to leave that checked for now. I'm not going to bother with a variable bitrate file. So these are the basic video settings, and for the most part, they're all you really need. But we'll take a very quick look under advanced settings and just call out a few things that might be relevant right now. Most of these are not, but the ones which are relevant we cover in due course. Most of these don't matter, but we'll just call out the key ones. Pixel aspect ratio, leave this on square if you're not working on a CinemaScope project. Data levels. I have a whole lecture on this later on, and it's especially relevant with the DNX codecs delivering into the Adobe suite, and it depends on the platform your client is using, Windows or Apple as well. But this is important when delivering DNX, and you'll definitely want to listen to that lecture when you get to it. Color space and gamma tag we will leave alone. Data burn-in we will also leave alone. Optimized media and proxies do not currently matter. Force sizing to highest quality and debayer. These two can be important. Force sizing to higher quality is only relevant if we've used an XML round-trip workflow or if we've edited directly in Resolve and there's pan and scan on the footage if we've blown up the footage and moved it around. Checking this box will maximize the quality of any rescaling for your footage. So it's an important one to check if you've used a lot of pan and scan. This is a baked master file, meaning any and all pan and scan was baked in at the time, so it's no longer an effect, so it's not going to do anything for us for this project. But in future projects, you may well want to check that. Force debayer to highest quality, only relevant if you're working with RED or R3D footage. If you are working on a RED project, you want this checked every single time. It makes sure that you don't accidentally render the Bayer pattern into your footage, which I've seen VFX artists do that by mistake before. Easy mistake to make. And finally, we have flat pass. This basically strips off all the grading work and exports a raw version of a graded timeline. Situationally useful, usually if the VFX artist are asking for plates. Other than that, I haven't used it. So that's all that really matters from the advanced settings here. So with that, I now want to give my file a name and choose a render destination. I will call this short sequence _01 _MJF. Now, I will correct sequence. I use a very simple naming convention unless I am instructed to do otherwise by the client. That convention is project title _ pass number, in this case 1 because it's first pass, but the next time we render this out it will be 2, then 3, etc. And then my initials so they know who is responsible for generating this file. On the vast majority of simple projects, corporate for web ads, that kind of thing, this will do you just fine. If your client tells you to name it a different way, do that. And if it's a more advanced project, if it's something serial length, if it's a web series, if it's something with a more organized pipeline, then make a point of asking what the naming conventions are so that you can conform to them. It's always your job to find out what the pipeline is and make sure that you integrate into it. So it's always better to ask too many questions than too few, believe me. So this is my simple naming convention. Then in location, I'm going to hit Browse. So what I want to do is go to my Resolve deliverables folder, and I just want to render this clip out. Now I've already got a clip here. If I have two clips with the same name, when I hit save, it will warn me, this clip already exists, do you want to replace it? In this case I'll hit yes, because I don't want another first pass hanging around. It's usually good practice to keep all of your passes intact. In this case I just wanted to show you that you can actually overwrite similar file names directly from Resolve without having to do anything manually. So now we've got it named, we've got all of our settings chosen. There is an audio panel up here. I tend to leave this at its default unless I'm instructed to do otherwise. Now that all of this is sorted, there's an Add to Render Queue button down here. And if I left click that, it will add a job to the render queue in the right-hand side of the screen. Now this is where all of our render jobs populate, and we can stack up multiple jobs at the same time and render them all out one after the other. We will take a look at that in a subsequent lecture. Once my job is present, what I want to do is either select the jobs I want to render or just hit the Render All button down here, and Resolve will render out the project. So now we've rendered our project out and we can go ahead and give the file to our client. Now we're going to take a look at rendering out multiple jobs, and we're also going to take a look at the rest of the XML pipeline in subsequent lectures. So go ahead and click on through once you're ready. This one's going to be shorter, but we're going to cover something that's quite important: setting up multiple jobs to render out. There are a number of reasons why you might need to do this. The two most common are that a single project contains a number of timelines that have been graded and now need delivering, or that you need to provide certain parts of the edit for VFX artists in need of plates to work with. On longer form projects, a client might also request to spot check scenes from a feature film as well. To deliver multiple jobs, you simply need to set multiple jobs up, and we'll do that first. What I'll do is I'll render out several chunks of this timeline, and I can set in points and out points on the timeline down here by dragging my playhead around and hitting I for an in point and O for an out point. Now, when I render, you can see this little dialog here says render in, out range, or entire timeline. I'm rendering a single clip and only within these two I/O points. I'm going to call this clip part 1, and I'm going to make sure that it's put in its corresponding deliverables folder. I'm then going to hit add to render queue, and we have a job up there. I'm not going to render that job yet. I'm going to set a second job going, call it part 2, and then add that to the render queue. See, I now have 2 jobs here. And then I'm going to render a third one, I/O, call it part 3, and now I have 3 jobs. Now I can render these one at a time. If I click Start Render, only the jobs with white borders are rendered out, so I can either Control click or Shift click to select multiple jobs, and then I just need to hit the Start Render button, and sure enough, these will all then render out in succession. If we have multiple timelines in our edit, all we need to do is go back to the Edit panel, navigate to that timeline, and then set the render job up in that timeline using the Delivery panel. Doing that, we can then render multiple jobs from different timelines out like this as well. Now, this covers rendering out multiple jobs from Resolve in the most efficient way possible. In the next lecture, we're going to cover the final step of the XML round trip. Click on through to the next lecture when you're ready. We're right at the finish line for our short sequence now. We're going to get our graded clips back into your NLE program using an XML. This approach gives our client and the online editor much greater control at the end of the post-production process, so it's the preferred way to deliver our projects. The first thing we're going to do is render all of our graded clips out, but this time we're going to check the individual clips checkbox. Now, Resolve only renders out the edits present on the timeline using their respective in and out points. This is a lot like media managing a project in Final Cut or using the project manager in Premiere Pro. So the first thing we do is set our delivery settings before going ahead and rendering out the project. QuickTime, DNxHR, HQX 10-bit is okay for this one. Then we're going to make sure we have a folder. Now, before we jump ahead and render this out, we're going to have to take care of the file naming conventions here. This file was delivered to us in a baked master format, and so if we leave it as, if we don't tell Resolve to use unique file names, it's going to continually overwrite every clip it's rendered with the next one, and in the end we're only going to end up with a single clip, which is obviously no use to us. To avoid that, we check the Use Unique File Names checkbox here. This gives a completely unique file name to every single clip that's rendered out of Resolve and makes sure that it doesn't accidentally overwrite anything that it's produced. After that, we can then say poem. This is actually the third pass, so 03. Don't need the source frame count, that's fine. And then we can add this to our render queue, and we can hit Start Render. Now we've got our graded clips but no XML to use in our reconform back in our NLE. We need to export an XML. Now, first save your project. Resolve can crash when you do this, although it's not as common as it used to be. We need to go back to the Edit panel, and then choose File, Export AAF XML, and what we're going to do is choose to export an XML file. Now, if you're using Premiere Pro, FCP7 XML v5 is what you want. If you're using Final Cut Pro X, then FCP XML is what you want. We'll give it a name. And then we hit Save. This is now exported an XML file, which we can use to reconform in Premiere Pro. So we're going to go to Premiere Pro, and just hold Control and hit I to hit Import. And we're going to choose the XML. We'll just drag the footage into the right bin, and the timeline into the timelines bin. And now when we open up our timeline, we have a timeline in Premiere Pro containing all of the graded edits we had in our timeline in Resolve. Now, if you're delivering this to a client or you've moved workstations, you're going to have to relink the clips, obviously. Some clients get left-footed by that because they don't really know how to use their software. So just make sure that you're on hand and you explain how you relink missing clips in Premiere Pro or in Final Cut or whatever. So we've now got our separate graded clips back in our NLE, and we can proceed with our online edit and final delivery. We've got some tech to go through before the first real-world project, so when you're ready, click on through to the next lecture. So, once our grade has been finished, we need to get this edit back into Avid fully graded. To do that, we need to export our graded media from Resolve and then take it back to Avid using another AAF that we generate that references the graded version of the timeline. Just like last time, we're going to need to go to the delivery panel and we'll have to export all of our graded clips from here individually. So I'm going to go to the delivery panel, and this time I'm actually going to use a preset. So I'm going to go under Avid AAF. So Avid isn't like other NLEs. Avid likes to use a format called MXF, which stands for Material Exchange Format, and it's basically another form of container. It's a format like .mov or .mp4 that can contain a number of different codecs. MXFs tend to be for Avid workflows. Now, it used to be MXFs were a bit temperamental outside of Avid, and to this day, every now and again, if you combine the DNxHD codec with an MXF wrapper, then you can get a few issues in things like even Resolve and Final Cut, and that it is not as much of a problem as it used to be, but it's still something worth keeping in mind that DNxHD codecs in MXF wrappers have caused issues before. So, we're going to export all of these individually. Now, when I hit the AAF shortcut, it sets everything kind of more or less correct. I'm just going to go into advanced settings, and I'm going to add 13 frame handles as per usual, just in case. And then we have everything we need. So then I need to browse location, and I'm going to go into, and here I have my deliverables folder. So this is for the AAF demo. I'm just going to select that folder, and then I hit add to render queue, then hit and select this job, and then hit start render. And then Resolve goes ahead and does its thing. Now, I don't need to go back to the edit panel and manually export an AAF or an XML or anything, because this preset actually does that by itself, so we've already got everything we need in that folder now. There's an extra step to take before we can actually get this back into Avid correctly. At this point, we are now done within Resolve, so we can save our project. I'll call this AAF demo. And then I can close Resolve. So now I need to go into my deliverables folder. and I need to take all of this, I need to copy it to my clipboard. Control C, Command C if you're on a Mac. And then I need to go into Windows, and I need to, I need to go into my C drive. Now I need to find my Avid Media Files folder, and this thing is a giant headache. This is a folder that needs to contain any MXF stuff or any files you're going to import, because Avid wants to index them first. And Avid automatically creates it the first time you import something. It can only be on the very top side of a drive, on the very top layer of a drive. This thing's a nightmare, and it's a horrible, horrible way to organize media in my opinion, but that's Avid. And I'm not the only person who thinks that either. So I need to go into the Avid Media Files folder, and into the MXF folder, and here I have number 1. I need to make a new folder with a number, and the number is just so we can keep organized. So I'm going to make a new folder, and because this is my most recent project, it's going to be 2. And then I actually need to paste, Control or Command V, all of my deliverable files into this folder, because I'm going to have to import these files from inside this folder into Avid, which is counterintuitive, but that's also Avid as well. So I've got all of my stuff in the right place now, and I need to open up Avid. So I'm here back in Avid, and you can see that when I open Avid back up, there's a little loading bar because it's been indexing anything new that's been added to the Avid Media folders, the Avid Media folder location. So I'm just going to minimize these windows for a second. So what I need to do is bring the media back in, the MXF media back in. So I need to go to Input and Import Media. And I actually need to go back to this PC, C drive, Avid Media Files, MXF. I need to manually navigate. Now, I'm not importing all of these like I would do a big click and drag or Command A and import in Premiere Pro or Resolve or anything else. I am looking for one file here, and that is this .mdb media database file. I'm just going to open that first, okay? So I'm going to hit open, and then that's going to bring all of the graded clips from my timeline into Avid. Now that I have done this, I am then going to right click and choose Input, Import Media, and I'm actually going to import the AAF file as well. Now this is just the AAF, and when I do that, I now have, bring that back, I have a new sequence which comes up here, which is now called AAF demo after my AAF file, and lo and behold, I have my graded media. Let's turn both tracks on, be helpful. I have my graded media back in Avid in the correct place, and this is now the end of the AAF workflow. What we will do after this is we go through the online edit, we make sure we have all of our graded stuff, we make sure everything is in the right place, we bring the audio back, we put in things like living holds, clocks, idents if it's for broadcast or cinema, and then we have to do the whole online edit and then spit it out in the correct format, like an AVC 100 MXF OP1A Atom for broadcast, or a TIFF sequence for a DCP mastering somewhere else. So this is now the last phase of the grade. After this point we go on to the online edit. So that's how we take care of a project in Avid. So this has been a good overview of the entire AAF round trip workflow. Click on through to the next lecture once you are ready.